Colorado opens up about new COVID-19 numbers that prove what we knew. The vast majority of Coloradans getting sick and dying in this latest surge are unvaccinated. Healthcare is stretched in rural Colorado. Ask the one ambulance crew covering hundreds of square miles. A prominent music festival doesn't have the funds for a 2021 show. They do have a new idea.
We certainly want for this to be homegrown, right? And specifically 5 points grown.
And a Coloradan returns to his classroom with an attention-getting lesson plan.
It was amazing. So it was well worth the wait. Well worth the wait.
Gather round, kids. Let's talk about space. He went and came back. All that is next. Colorado's current surge of COVID cases, almost 900 confirmed cases in hospitalized patients, that's approaching levels seen in the very first wave of the pandemic here. About 10 Coloradans are dying of COVID each day. Today, the state released information that people have been asking for months, a breakdown of how many of those serious cases are happening in vaccinated people. It confirms what doctors have said, that this surge is mostly impacting the unvaccinated. Anusha Roy looks at what we're learning.
This is the online dashboard people have been waiting for. It shows vaccinated breakthrough cases versus unvaccinated. The same breakdown for hospitalizations and deaths. The state gave concrete numbers that a fully vaccinated person is 3.7 times less likely to be hospitalized and 5.8 times less likely to die from COVID. It's essentially telling us the same thing health experts were already saying.
Even though it's not zero, your vaccine is still very protective.
So what is the point of this? The state health department said it's transparency.
Clear information about the different level of risk of becoming a COVID-19 case, of being hospitalized or dying of COVID-19 if you are unvaccinated versus vaccinated right now.
And yet the state said that there is a lag in the data coming into their systems. 1 week for vaccine breakthrough data, 2 weeks for hospitalized breakthrough cases, and 3 weeks for death data. Even though hospitals were told to start reporting vaccination cases on a daily basis through a governor's order.
Hospitals are reporting to us through that system is aggregate data. It's not the highest quality patient level data.
So the state pulls in multiple sources of data to get a better sense of what's going on, which takes time.
So we don't expect our vaccine breakthrough rates to change overnight. Even with the emergence of the Delta variant, it really took a while for Delta to emerge and become the dominant strain and to see that impact on our vaccine effectiveness data here in Colorado.
The trends are probably more important than any given day.
And if nothing else, it allows people to do some fact checking themselves.
Transparency is something that is needed for people to just feel like they're getting the whole story.
So Dr. Barron from UC Health said that the daily reporting, that goes beyond just vaccination status and cases, but it's also a way for them to keep tabs on capacity, beds, and equipment, because, Kyle, we're still in this phase, right, where it's just day-to-day operations during the pandemic.
And Anusha, when they're looking at these breakthrough infections in people who have been vaccinated, they're looking at what? The person's health, their behavior, which vaccine they got.
Yeah, absolutely. So there was a couple of interesting data sets today, right? We have older people who have gotten breakthrough cases, and that could be waning immunity, underlying health conditions, or maybe they just didn't have a robust reaction to the vaccine. But then we're also seeing breakthrough cases in that 20 to 49-year-old category. And there's a whole bunch of things that are being looked at right now, Kyle. Anything from, do they have jobs where they're seeing a lot of people? Are they just out and about more? They're starting to look at different efficacy for vaccines, but overall the state was saying that people should expect with breakthrough cases, as more people get vaccines, that number's also going to inch up as well.
All right, Anusha, we will continue to watch it. Thank you for that breakdown. City of Denver says that Civic Center Park is going to have more security and tighter rules when it reopens. The city's closing that park indefinitely to clean up human waste and discarded needles. Denver Parks and Recreation told our next team today that the park will reopen with more curfew enforcement. It's supposed to keep people from being in the park overnight. The city is promising more park rangers, better lighting, and more maintenance staff there. The closure and cleanup is expected to be weeks at a minimum. It's going to allow the city to clean up that waste, deal with what it says is a rodent infestation due to garbage in the park, and try to get the lawns to regrow.
We're not trying to kick anyone out of the park. We're not trying to push people out of the park. We want people to actually enjoy the park. And there is a lot of resources available to people that are interested in help. for addiction and other issues. This is people visiting the park during the day. It's not, and there's just too many people at this point, and unfortunately there's a lot of criminal activity that's going on. So for the safety of our employees as well as our other visitors in the park, this is something that we need to close down and actually mitigate at this point.
Pretty drastic measure and a serious problem. So we asked to speak with Mayor Michael Hancock about the city's decision to close that historic landmark park and whether the city has any new plans that would get at the actual core issues driving the problems there. We were told that Mayor Hancock is out of the office this week and unavailable. So much of our conversations about healthcare capacity during the pandemic have been about what happens once somebody gets to the hospital. You know, will there be an ICU bed if needed? Nurses to staff it? Well, the stretch and strain on the system starts well before that point out in rural Colorado. There are ambulance services there covering huge areas, sometimes with only one crew on duty when somebody needs to go to the hospital. Mark Salinger takes us to Lyman.
I think, a lot of the times folks just don't realize the adversity that comes along with rural living.
In this part of Colorado,
it's a challenge that we take on every day.
Every second counts.
Every call takes an hour and 3/4 to 2 hours at least, and if not longer. It's 15 miles from here to the hospital.
Rob Handley's ambulance service in Lyman serves around 3,000 people in Lincoln County and beyond.
It's over 500 square miles.
He usually only has one ambulance and crew in service.
That's it. That's right.
Resources and cash have always been stretched thin when it comes to emergency response in rural parts of the state. There are only 3 full-time employees here and a couple dozen volunteers ready to work when needed. The pandemic has only made it more challenging.
During the first go-around, we had maybe 3 in 3 months that were known COVID positive people or highly suspected. Now we're getting 2 or 3 calls a day.
That's not every day, but those busy days come more often now, though the number of COVID patients out here is still far fewer than any of the larger cities in the metro area. Still, the impact is big.
Out here it's huge because we only have one crew on here. So if something goes on where they have to leave the area, we always have people in the background, or hopefully we do.
Always on call, just in case another emergency comes in when the one ambulance in service is already helping out.
But we have to treat a lot of folks as if they have COVID just to be safe.
They could always use more resources, but they'll always respond when the call comes in.
On a good day or a bad day, that's what we do. And it's always about doing what's best for the patient.
An interesting note that Rob told me about. He says in some ways there is a silver lining of the pandemic in that more people are talking about and realizing the challenges that rural ambulance services like his face. A lot of times these problems aren't new, Kyle, but at least now more people are talking about it and realizing that, hey, this is a problem that's been going on for a long time.
Yeah, certainly not new that obviously a lot of what goes on in Lyman is driven by I-70. You got 50,000 people passing through there a day. Some of them are going to have medical needs. But then the other issue is that it's not as simple as picking somebody up at their house in a rural area and just dropping them off at the county hospital.
Exactly. The nearest hospital is Hugo, which is 15 miles away to Lyman. But that hospital, at least at the beginning of the pandemic, was not treating COVID patients. They just didn't have the resources. They are now. So a lot of times still at this point in the pandemic, the ambulance service is driving people hours to Denver each way.
Yeah.
And at that point, the ambulance is out of service, at least for people in Lyman. So they have to call in backup and more people who are on call.
Even more strain. Really interesting stuff. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. Almost half of the people who get out of prison in Colorado are going to go back. That's what the numbers say. It's not great. Not great for them, not great for our society, our community. Recidivism is a really difficult problem to solve. The Second Chance Center is a nonprofit in the metro area that helps people with that re-entrance to society. Their recidivism rate for their participants, it's not 50%, it's 10%. That track record of success is why the Second Chance Center is featured in this week's Word of Thanks microgiving campaign. They call their approach Live, Learn, Earn. People leaving prison go into Second Chance Center's peer housing, where their rent's covered for 2 months while they find work, and then they start paying rent. The support of that communal housing is key in making sure that people stay sober, stay employed, and stay encouraged to succeed in society. Most need 6 to 9 months to create that stable foundation, and then they're off on their own. The Second Chance Center is also adding a new child and family advocate focused on the family reunification process for people leaving prison, rebuilding bonds that can keep people on that path to success. Text thanks to 303-871-1491 and I'll send you that link to donate. As always, I will match the first 50 donations of $5 that roll in. We all say that we believe in second chances. That nonprofit is in the business of making second chances happen for more Coloradans. It makes our state happier, safer, and more productive in the process. So I'm excited that we can help them expand their work through word of thanks.
The pandemic is ruining plans for the 5 Points Jazz Festival, so organizers are taking the limited funds they have and seeding smaller events. No use seeding anything in the soil on the moon. The challenge that's being worked on in Colorado is how we would move the moon dust to build stuff there.
This will give them enough material to think literally outside the box, outside the planet.
Hey, if it was easy, there wouldn't be a worldwide competition to figure it out. That's next.
The pandemic forced a lot of arts events to take a one-year hiatus in 2020. Events are how Denver Arts and Venues gets its annual funding. So they say now, 2021, they're still not in a position to bring back the 5 Points Jazz Festival this year. Doesn't mean they aren't doing anything, though. 5 Points Jazz Festival went virtual last year, and this year, given the current COVID-19 surge as well as low funding, Denver Arts and Venues is going to try something new. They're calling it 5 Points Jazz Activation Grants. Grants of up to $5,000 to fund smaller jazz projects and performances in 5 Points.
This grant program is actually a way to look at beyond the festival day. These are small grants up to $5,000, and they can really take the shape of any kind of creative activation. It can be through a lecture series about the history of jazz. It can be through bringing young performers to perform jazz in a park.
And again, we're not talking about tax money here. Denver Arts and Venues makes its money from its events, so it's not included in the general budget. The applications for those 5 Points Jazz grants are available on their website.
We just can't catch a break around here. The smoke, unfortunately, back across the metro area. Air quality alerts in place for the majority of the state. Air quality remains unhealthy for everyone. Visibility extremely poor, not just because of the smoke, but also high levels of ozone out there. High pressure off to the west. That allows all that smoke to seep back into Colorado as we look ahead toward tomorrow afternoon. The worst of it across the eastern plains. This ridge of high pressure not only bringing us the smoke, but also some drying conditions and extremely hot temperatures. Could be a record breaker tomorrow. My forecast at 96, triple digits in Lamar with 70s and 80s up in the high country. Warmer on Friday, but relief on the way next week.
There are Coloradans thinking about an unusual problem: how to move moon dust and moon soil. We'll need to be able to do that if we explore the moon and build stuff there in the coming decades. Colorado School of Mines is working with Lockheed Martin for what's called the Over the Dusty Moon Challenge. Students from any university anywhere in the world can take this up, and the challenge is to design a system that can move lunar soil from point A to point B.
That may seem like a very simple thing for us because we see it all the time on construction sites. You see these trucks and conveyor belts or in mining operations. But try to do that in a place that doesn't have an atmosphere, has a vacuum. Extreme temperatures, minus 150 degrees at 1/6 the gravity of Earth, and try to do it with dust of the moon, which is not your typical pebbles, rounded pebbles on creeks here in Colorado. This is something that has never seen any erosion from water or wind. It's jagged edges, it's abrasive, it's very fine.
Students also have to consider the risks to humans and machines. The dust is so fine, if it were to be inhaled, that would be dangerous, and it could easily destroy equipment that's not designed properly. The challenge works in 2 phases: design and then prototype. We'll let you know what the locals come up with when we can.
You know how excited teachers make for excited students?
So he opens the bag and we get our flight jackets. We're like, woohoo, flight jackets!
A teacher in Highlands Ranch went straight to the source for his lesson plans on space. Next.
A good teacher encourages students' dreams. Teacher in Highlands Ranch is doing that by following his own into space. And now back in the classroom, he's sharing what he learned. Our Byron Reed has the story.
It's not just gravity that starts the process.
An astronomy class at Highlands Ranch High School.
It's the study of space.
The meaning of energy doesn't always describe the sun.
The more we learn about asteroids, the more we can learn about how our solar system formed, and that's why we're sending so many missions to asteroids right now.
Bob MacArthur is a science teacher at the high school, and he's getting his students excited about a subject that's been a passion all his life.
I remember looking at Halley's Comet back in 1986 with my family, backyard barbecues, with our telescopes out, just having a great time.
That passion turned into a reality when he was selected as one of 28 educators to serve as an ambassador in NASA's Airborne Astronomy program. Over the summer, these teachers got to take part in research flights on NASA's Stratospheric Observatory for Infrared Astronomy, or SOFIA.
And it's a 100-inch telescope in the back of a 747, and you're up there flying around all night doing various research. Flying at 45,000 feet, you get above 90% of the water vapor, which allows SOFIA to observe infrared light from space.
The program gives high school teachers hands-on experiences with infrared astronomy and the ability to learn how our solar system works.
We can look for water on the moon, we can study star formation, planet formation, and it's really important to have infrared astronomy for that, and we got to be part of that. So let me...
Now MacArthur can share his excitement about science with his students.
Holy sunspots!
And keep on teaching them about the solar system with as much energy as the sun.
And I thank the kids for that passion and helping me bring the energy every day.
For next,
I'm still processing the fact I got to do it. It's like,
I'm Byron Reed.
The SOFIA Mobile Observatory flies into the stratosphere to allow astronomers to study the solar system and beyond, ways that are not possible from the ground. MacArthur was the only teacher from Colorado selected for that program. The most Colorado thing we saw today is a visitor no one was expecting. That and your feedback next. The most Colorado thing we saw today was an uninvited house guest who was still very polite. Rob sent this in from Kittredge between Morrison and Evergreen. An elk triggered the doorbell camera and then just politely waited, looking in the window, waiting for somebody to come to the door, apparently. If you look closely, you'll see there's another elk in the background there behind the car, so at least a couple of party crashers that failed to get an invitation. Coloradans leaving prison have about a 1 in 2 chance of going back someday. The nonprofit Second Chance Center has a proven track record of reducing that recidivism down to just 10% for its program participants. Second Chance Center helps people find housing and stable work, helps them to stay sober and connected with their families. It's the stuff that success after incarceration is made of. Everybody wins when people who leave prison succeed instead of reoffending and go back. Text thanks to 303-871-1491 to join me and a bunch of other people in supporting Second Chance Center through this week's Word of Thanks microgiving campaign. The proof is in the numbers. What they do works. It works for our community. Feedback tonight. William says about the Civic Center Park closure and our inability to get a hold of the mayor this week, who's out of the office. When the mayor returns, are you going to follow up with the answer for us, William? Yes, as you well know if you watch the program, the options for elected officials are scheduled interviews or unscheduled interviews at our discretion. Mayor is obviously allowed to take some time off. We assume that he'll be happy to talk to us when he returns to the office. Mike says, evidently, your daughter cannot decide whether she likes daddy's beard or not. Those were the rules last time I had a beard, Mike. Now she's 3 and she thinks she can choose everything from our outfits to our meals. So if she says anything about the beard, I'll tell her to mind her own business.